Hi, everybody. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're on YouTube and you'd like to join the conversation, you first have to travel to Zoom, and you'll see a link there where you can travel to Makana, and that's where you can ask questions and also chat with everybody here. Don't leave any comments in YouTube. We're not looking at those. So anyway, so if you would like to be part of the panel, so once you get here, you may decide that, hey, I know something that could add to the panel. I'd like to share this with the rest of the community. You just need to get here a little early, 6:40 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and then you can be part of the panel. But once we start the mic checks, generally we're closed. For the panel. At 6 o'clock, you can come in early to test your system. Like, is it ready to go? Do you have some mic issues? Have you have a new mic, new connection, new lights that you want to test? 6 to 6:30 is a great time to do that. We have a kind of general discussion then, but that's a good time to come in for that. At 7 o'clock, we start the questions. Now, the questions are really based on what you need to know, what you need to learn. We all learn from each other. We learn from talking about it with each other, but we also learn from your questions. And so the problems that you're having, a lot of us will eventually have. And so you're helping us, inoculate against getting stopped in the future. So your questions are out there, and we'd love to have your questions. And so go ahead and throw them in right now. It's better to throw them in before the show starts or right at the first 10 minutes than later, as things start to get kind of crowded and we start speeding up. Second hour is usually a specific vertical. Today we're going to talk about using Keynote as a graphics engine for our live streams. It's cheap and easy to use, and so in fact, it's so cheap it's free. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to use it and how to key the Keynote graphics into with an Atem switcher. The rest of the schedule is all emailed to you every day. If you're registered to Zoom, you'll get an email every day that tells you what the rest of the schedule looks like. Anyway, if you'd like to share this with other people, if this is something that you think is interesting and you'd like to grow it, you can just use that link that I just put into Makana. That is that's how you register. Don't use your own link, because then people will come in as you. Okay, Bill, let's go ahead and jump into the questions.
Okay, the first one comes from Tony Adamopoulos of Missouri, who says, is there a small mount or mount adapter for a webcam, for example, a C920, that allows one to pan and tilt with a handheld remote? So,
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, so yes. Now, pan and tilt, there's a gross thing, a motorized head that will pan and tilt in not very fine increments. For camera operators, pan and tilt are specific moves that you want to be smooth, and that's more difficult. If you just want something super basic that'll do it, these things, and I've had a couple of them over the course of my life, will do pan and tilt, but it is not fine motor control, and it's
Who makes that one?
That's Bestcore. They're
Bestcore.
$100 or something, 150, somewhere in that zone, depending on what you get them at. And they will do the job. They will point a camera, pan, tilt, but they will not do it in fine increments. So if you're trying to dial in a camera shot, this is not a good solution. But they do work. And in fact, I've had some that I've bought. They sell a remote extension, and I've been 100 feet away and have been able to roughly dial in a camera. With the extension, it's not super reliable, but you can get the job done.
Yeah, I haven't found anything that's cost effective that you can mount a camera to but really you want to think about whether you should be, that you can do really smooth pans. That's the big thing. Go ahead, Chris.
I guess that's the critical question is that what they're looking for, on-air pans?
If you're looking for on-air pans, then that's hard to do inexpensively. If you're just looking for readjusting the camera, the Bestcore works great. The other thing to look at is a Huddle Cam or a Brio that are going to let you zoom in and move around inside of that camera. So it's a 4K sensor with a 1080p output. So both the Huddle Cam and the Brio allow you to do that. And the Huddle Cam has an external controller that you can use to move it around, unless you're me and you lost the controller and then you can't move it
around. Check your garage.
Yeah, exactly. It's somewhere in there. Anyway, so otherwise, then you need to have software to move it around. All right, next. Oh, there it is. Thanks, Scott. Okay, well, if you could just hand it right through that screen, that'd be perfect. All right, yeah, here we go. We'll just grab onto it. All right, next question.
Victor Cahayo of Brookings, South Dakota, and here in the panel says, in Final Cut, I press comma to go forward one frame and period to go, comma to go back period to go forward. How do I go forward and back a half frame or a quarter frame? Oh, that's
Go ahead, Bill.
So a frame is one unit of video. There is no such thing really as a quarter frame. And this brings up actually the discussion of kind of timing standards. Video has timing based on this frame rate. You'll hear 30 frames, 24 frames sometimes. Those are really the increments to get a whole frame. The audio track that's attached to video is far more sophisticated, and it might be running at 44,000 hertz, 44,000 cycles a second, or 48,000 cycles a second. So in really good NLEs, you can get down and edit far more granularly on your audio track than is capable of editing on the video track. But most NLEs will make that a little bit constrained so that you don't get too wacky and mess things up. But you will notice that discrepancy between a fixed video drummer, I mean, think about it as a marching band. They're all marching. And then if you've got an ant running along beside them, it's taking far more steps, making sure that at the cut points that cadence is synchronized is a difficult thing. And that's sometimes why you get the slippage of a vocal track against video, because they're running at two different tempos.
So let me ask it another way. So if that's the case, how do I highlight the audio track and move that by half frames or quarter frames?
Yeah, you can definitely do that. And you just have to select the
How?
video.
How do I do that? This is my question.
I believe that you do it by holding the Option key down and using the caret or the period. So if you hold the Option key, or I'm sorry, caret or
target the audio track first.
Period or comma, and then hold the Option key down, and I think it will do 1/80th of a frame. I think that's so it's Option, the Option period or Option comma will do, I think, 1/80th of a frame. It'll nudge it back and forth very, very
Victor,
small.
the audio also has to be separated from the video track.
Yep. Yeah, but if it's separated and you want to select it, so select it, and I think that you hold down the Option key and then the same thing you had before. So
there are quite a few tutorials online to do this, so you can check out YouTube, and they'll say it's called subframe audio editing. That would be the header you'd search for, and you'll find tutorials on it.
Next question.
It's 80, Alex. It's 80.
I think it's 1/80th.
I thought it was 100.
I think it's 1/80th.
Okay,
but I could be wrong. Next question.
It's definitely different cadence. Okay, we're moving on. Looks like Jeff had a hand up.
Next question.
Next question.
When I say next question,
I'm sorry.
I was all right. Next question.
Okay, next question.
I will let the panelists know that I'm trying to move. I'm making decisions much harder because we keep on running out of time at the end. So when I say next question, I may cut people off. I may not get to everyone. If I feel like the question's answered, I'm probably going to move it forward. Next question.
Okay, we're moving on to Bo Cordell of Charleston, South Carolina. As I understand Alex's method of bringing in remote presenters, he's essentially using one computer for each presenter, which can add up to a lot of computers. How does he control them? Large KVM, TeamViewer, VNC? Alex?
So with the way we do it, you really need some kind of panel. Now, I know that you can now do web control, which we haven't done yet because we already had a bunch of little Samsung. We have a bunch of the little Samsung tablets. Those tablets act as the controller for each room, because we're using the Rooms platform within Zoom. So the issue is, I think you could do it where you could open a bunch of web pages and control all the rooms on one page. We just haven't needed to do that because we already had something that was working. But I think we're going to probably try to move to that where we kind of identify that. Now, what we do is we have multi-views. So we have multi-views up, and those are usually, like, I think a 9x9 is what we typically use for them, just so you can kind of see it, but you can go to 16x16. And so we just see a bunch of screens, and we'll typically see both screens as pairs, in the multi-view. So we'll see the two screens coming out of each one. So it's one or two monitors, depending on how big we want each screen to be. And then you grab the right controller and control it. But we're not really KVMing in. That's kind of the nice thing about Rooms, is that you're not really trying to control a computer. There's a whole interface that's there to control it. And so whether it's a web page that is a nice interface to do that, or or one of the tablets, it's a relatively straightforward thing to control those rooms. But again, it works when the way we do it, we're using Zoom rooms for each, not only a computer for each one, but a Zoom room for each one. And that maximizes our control as well as maximizes resolution. So if we do a point-to-point connection with a Zoom room, we're typically getting 1080p, out of the room. And so that's going to give us a higher quality, although you will see some dropouts occasionally with 1080p, just because it's very resource intensive for everybody involved. Next question.
Victor of Brookings, South Dakota is back again with, anyone have anything exciting to report from CES, the Consumer Electronics Show, yet?
Nope.
I will say that I've been skipping through some of the presentations, and I just feel like the whole virtual set thing is pretty forced. We've had a lot of discussions internally about whether we should use virtual sets versus using people's homes versus, all these other things. And watching the CES things, I feel validated in the fact that I said, we probably shouldn't use virtual sets, because I think it looks really like over the top, and it just seems inauthentic at this point in a way that I didn't think it would. I've built lots of keynotes with virtual sets, so it's not like I haven't done it, but I think it was in a different time. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I did notice that Samsung was using actually video walls, because when they zoomed in, you could see the pixels. But one thing I saw, TCL had an interesting keynote that they showed some roll-up scrolling screens that rolled up like a scroll, and then or a phone that had you hit a button and the phone changes height, and the screen extends up, and then it extends down into itself, which was kind of interesting.
Pretty soon we'll have window shade LCDs like the Weather Channel Back to the Future 2 style.
That's what they showed in the prototype, is somebody pulling a little tube out of their backpack and opening it up and looking at a map and then closing it back.
I'm afraid I just keep thinking, I've seen that this technology has been slowly moving forward, and I just go, well, how long will that last? Like how long, what's the the shelf life, or what's the use life of something flexible? And I think that's the that's what they say is that one step ahead you're a leader, and 2 steps ahead you're a martyr. And I still think that that's in the 2 steps ahead area. Go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, we've been seeing about that roll up screen for many years now. The other interesting one was GM. Take a look at their keynote, because they had showed a flying drone, single person drone, that looked really amazing. Offset propeller. It
does look pretty cool. Like I was like, I could fly one of. I would like to fly one of those. I don't know if I could fly one of them. What's interesting is that we are going to get to a point, and then Ray's probably good to discuss this. Is that flying helicopters is hard. Flying drones is much easier, especially with all the controls. So I think that we're on the precipice, probably in the next 5 years, of something that really uses drone fly-by-wire kind of approach to flying, where you may just see a whole new class of people that are flying all over the place because they don't need to learn how to actually fly a helicopter. It's more like, here's how to fly a drone, and you have a bunch of safety features, and the drones all know where each other are, and there's a lot of in fact, with GPS and the way drones work, you can it'd probably be safer than the air. I mean, safer than the ground. In a lot of cases, it would be safer to fly a drone. And so I do like the idea of flying from my house to the office in a drone. Would be. I have an ample landing on both sides. I think I could pull it off. Go ahead, Stuart.
2 things, one on drones, one on roll-up screens. Roll-up screens are history the day somebody invents a portable handheld holographic projector. And as for the drones, if you have a look for Emacs, you'll find a Chinese company that makes drones that already have a taxi service, and it is more automated than Tesla's.
Yeah.
You get in it, there's no controls at all. You tell it where you want it to go, and it flies you. Done.
And I'm sure the Chinese FAA completely approves of it, but my guess is that ours doesn't.
Yeah, but I think we will see. I definitely think that service, and it may be a service, that we get down to that process. But it's going to be it's interesting. I think that the only thing about it that's interesting is that I think COVID has pushed back on the idea of renting, like of just having a car as a service, because the number one reason I don't use Uber is that is because of COVID. So I think people will have a hard time getting over that for a while. So anyways, it'll be interesting there. I don't know if I saw anything else that was announced that I was particularly excited about. I think CES was kind of invisible to us. I think that's part of the problem, is it just didn't really come out. Go ahead, Oliver, and then Jason.
Yeah, so something more a little bit down to earth is for Mac users that with Big Sur they've enabled hubbing of Thunderbolt 3 ports, and there's some of the first Thunderbolt 3 docks coming out that also have a Thunderbolt 3 hub. So that's a very important thing to get more interfaces into the Mac.
And I think that a lot of us have been tracking OWC for a while, so that CES's announcement didn't show up as new to us because we're all waiting for they'll all come out in mass so we can buy them. But you're right that it's a huge deal to be able to get more USB-C or Thunderbolt connections. Go ahead, Jason.
Oliver basically took the words right out of my mouth. A point of interest, though. OWC has iterated. I mean, just what was it, 2 months ago or something? They announced their first hub. They've iterated, and they now have another version that is the hub, but it also includes USB 3.0, or I'm sorry, 3.1. So full spec USB-A 3.1 plus 100 watts of PD, which is pretty nice. So they've basically added to their hub.
That's great.
Only 85 watts.
Only 85
I'm sorry.
watts
Yeah, 85 watts. That's right.
Next question.
Moving on to Jeff Francis here in the panel from Columbia, South Carolina. Has anyone streamed to Salesforce Patreon Manager? Any sharp edges to watch?
And I think it's Patron Manager, not Patreon.
Oh,
Manager.
I'm sorry, Patron.
And
Manager.
Jeff, I'm not actually familiar with it. What can you tell us a little about what it is?
I'm going to find out tomorrow because clients that I'm working with, they use that for their ticketing. And so they're going to use that as their streaming platform because it's a paywall. So we're doing a test event tomorrow before Saturday's concert.
Got it. Yeah, well, let us know what you think. Yeah, I have not seen it, but I guess yeah, it's it's something that's kind of sits on top of Salesforce. It's like one of their, I can't remember what they call it, but their little apps. All right, next question.
Moving on to Barry Brimmer of Atlanta, who's here in the panel today. Has anyone tried using the iPad app portfolio for iPad for presentation with the Atem?
I have not. Have you used it, Barry?
Yeah, we've used it since about 2015. It's made specifically for photographers, but we've used it because we used to create DVDs for clients for trade shows. And then when that started changing to higher resolution, we needed something that they could show, run in a loop, and then on a moment's notice, tap on it and jump to a specific section instead of menuing through there. And so it works really seamlessly on the iPad and the Atem for doing presentations, for quickly bringing up stuff, but then jumping. My interface never changes on my end, but when it shows on a screen, and it was one of the first ones that showed full screen.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. I'm definitely gonna check it out. Go ahead, Jason.
It's $15.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, immediately my head just thinks I can't think of a scenario where I can't just do that in Keynote, but a bespoke app might be a neat thing. Yeah.
Next question.
Shane Foley of Ashland, Oregon is in with, I'm using Ecamm Live and I like so many things about it, but yesterday I heard Leland answer a question about creating audio buses in vMix. What's the best streaming software for virtual production with a focus on bringing in multiple guests and creating custom AV returns for those guests? Thanks.
There's a lot.
Well,
there's any of the professional versions of software. I wouldn't recommend ManyCam for professional production, but as far as vMix or OBS or what we're looking at Mimo Live, they're all viable solutions. Mimo's more Mac based.
Oliver, what is how many callers can you take in Mimo Live?
That depends on the machine you have. We know of one customer who had 18 Mimo calls running at the same time, but he had I think he had one of the top of the line iMac Pros, so enough processors.
So there's no hard limit. It's just processor.
So there's no hard limit in the software for that. No.
And then it does mix minus built in.
Yep, exactly.
Interesting. Yeah. So that Memo Live is a good one for the Mac. I think a lot of folks here are using. I mean, I think the two leaders within our group is probably Memo Live on the Mac and vMix on the PC. And then there's, just some OBS and some other things floating around. But I think that those are the two leaders that we see, I think, on a day-to-day basis of what people are using. Next question. I think
Next
Memo
question.
and Leland, vMix is limited to 8, right? It's eight callers.
Yeah, you can get a 4-caller. Actually, you can get a 2-caller version, a 4-caller version, or an 8-caller version. So it depends on your price point.
Next question.
Yeah, Stuart says, my favorite soundy gal is looking to update from her Zoom F8 and has a lead on a 788T with a mixer console and iPad included. What are her other options for a 1/4 of Alex budget?
If you're talking about 1/4 of an Alex, if you can get a 788 with the CL9, which I assume is what you're talking about, for $250, you're getting that's a lot of hardware. Like that.
I should point out, I was assuming the conversion for the exchange rate would be worse, but that's what she's looking at. And I just
for $250.
What are her other options in the same sort of price range?
For $250?
No.
For $250,
I just
get
didn't
that.
want. Yeah, I just didn't want anything that would be
but for $500, for that, the quality of that mixer, for pretty much anything less than about $750 would be a jump on it as fast as you can kind of solution with all of the, that's an incredible amount of power, for the price. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, like in the secondhand market, from what I know, from what I've seen recently, 788s secondhand with the CL8 go for around $2,000 to $3,000 US still. They hold their value so well because the preamps are amazing.
I mean,
but
they're complex. That's the downside is just you really, they are. We did a lot of shows, hundreds of shows with just the 788, but it was a very, you had to know what you were doing, to do it. It's definitely not it'll just work. And the interface has grown a lot in the mixed pre's and in the 8 series. Go ahead, Courtney, and then back to Mickey and then Stuart.
Yeah, at that price, I would make sure you check the serial number against the list of stolen 788s with sound devices.
Yeah, that's a really low price.
Who owned it previously, because sounds like it's hot to me.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mickey, and then Stuart.
Yeah, that's a good point, Courtney. And Sound Devices does keep a nice master list of those missing 788s. But other options to look at, like nowadays, if she doesn't need that many channels, I would look at the 633. It's a lot lighter, a lot smaller, and a lot more power efficient than the 788. I like the preamps of the 7 series more than the 6 series, but in terms of the flexibility of routing and general ease of use of the interface, they've improved a lot on it with the 6 series.
Good, Stuart.
Cool. Look, I had no idea what the price range was for these things when I put the 0.25 Alexes in there. I just didn't want over the top.
Right.
And I should point out the only one that I can find on eBay Australia is 4,200 Australian, which is that's more than I paid for the camera sitting behind me in real terms.
I mean, the main thing is that I think that
for complexity, we're talking about a person who would easily understand this.
The real question is also how many outputs you need. So how many inputs and how many outputs. I still think that for the price, your best preamps are really the mixed pre series. Like the mixed pre series are using their preamps, and those are the mixed pre. The 2 series is using. I mean, you've got 32-bit float, and I know that Zoom has 32-bit float too, but I can tell you, as someone who's tested them, the preamps in the Zoom recorders and the preamps in the Sound Devices recorders are not the same. Like they're not. So they're like, it's like like
they're not even in the same planet. Okay,
they're like a high school. It's like a high school football player and a pro football player. It's kind of the delta between the two. So we just have to remember that we're saving money on the Zoom, but in my opinion, the most important part of a recorder is the preamp. And so that is that is why I bought it. Like I can use all kinds of things if I don't care about the preamp. Go ahead, Leland.
I just think we don't want to definitely tell people that they shouldn't buy them at all, because we want people to be able to experience some professional, sub-professional grade equipment and learn how to use it at least. And if they can't afford the high-end
it sounds
equipment,
like
at least try some of the small stuff first.
Well, I use zooms in the field, where I'm in locations where if I had to throw it out of the car as a safety procedure, I could. like with sound devices, I would be like, oh really? Do I have to throw this out? With Zoom, I'd be like, part of the work. So anyway, so next question.
Moving on to Perry Miller of Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Alton Brown's Quarantine Kitchen returned yesterday. Amazing entertainment. Is he really only using an iPhone, a tripod, and simple lighting with no crew to produce his live show?
Alton Brown is probably one of the few people that could actually do the whole thing himself. He started off as a DP, so he was already doing camera work and lighting and everything else. He went into cooking after already knowing how to do all the shooting. That's why Good Eats is so much better than everything else when it comes to cooking and the kind of the gold standard. He looked at the cooking stuff that was out there, decided that it came up short, then went to cooking schools to figure out how to do all the things, then built, and spent lots of time, evidently, according to his responses to me and Twitter. I guess he picked up a lot on reading connections or watching connections and seeing how the flow worked, and then built a show around it. But so if anyone was going to be able to do it on an iPhone, it would be him. The earlier stuff I saw that he had done with the Quarantine Kitchen looked like it was a short depth of field. To me, it looked like it was more than that, but I could be wrong. He could totally pull it off with an iPhone. Like, he's the kind of person that could pull it off. And I will say that the new iPhones, the camera, you could totally do broadcast work on. I've shot some stuff recently that I keep on looking at it going, I can't believe this came out of a phone. It's, other than the short depth of field, everything else as far as the quality goes on, I'm shooting in, high dynamic range, and it's got incredible, detail. It's now, what it doesn't do very well, by the way, trees, forests, like at a distance. So if you shoot a forest in a distance and you zoom in on it, it just looks like a Mandelbrot. Like the compression can't keep up with what you've asked it to do. So that's the one place where it doesn't handle it very well. But he could do it. I'll take a look at it. I haven't seen it yet. The new ones, anyway. Next question.
Moving on to Shane Foley of Ashland, Oregon, who says, over the weekend, I dusted off a Tascam DP24SD Porta Studio mixer that I really haven't used much. In setting up the Mix Minus, I have the option of pushing my mic to the send bus, either at the input source or at the track fader. What's the difference, and which is best for live streaming?
Go ahead, Mickey.
I yield my time to Jeff Francis. He'll explain it better than I could.
He threw the ball to Mickey, and then he just passes it like a shuttle pass. All right, go ahead, Jeff.
I haven't used this mixer, but I looked up the block diagram, and it looks like it has 8 inputs, and those can feed to tracks. And then you have 24 tracks that it records internally and can feed back. So I think if you're just using it live, going from the input source is your shorter signal chain, unless you need some kind of processing in there. So there is one insert in the input stage. I'm not sure if you're allowed to insert a delay there, and that might be the one effect you need to align your mic with video. So that would be the only time if you needed to go to the longer chain through track to get those plugins.
There you go. Next question.
Moving on to Sound Mixer San Francisco, Jeff Shees, who's often here in the panel. I don't see if he's here today. What are the options for sending iCap network captions to both a Zoom meeting and a live stream at the same time? And he's on an EEG Falcon.
And are you using a 492? I mean, do you have an actual piece of hardware?
No hardware. So this is just streaming directly to EEG, which is the Falcon platform. And then that sends out to Vimeo in this case.
And what you're trying to do is send it to Vimeo and to live stream?
Yeah, and so there's an access key for each iCap, I think, connection or instance. And I'm wondering, can I use 2 access keys potentially? Because the only way that EEG has, well, the non-hardware way is to use Falcon Classic. And that is one that actually integrates with Zoom directly. And I've tested that so I can send captions directly into Zoom. So I'm wondering, how can I get this sort of dual path? The captioning group actually has their own custom streaming connection software that goes to iCap, but they want to be inside Zoom and copy out the API key in order to connect to that.
So one solution, just off the top of my head, I have a ton of experience with EEGs, but not with Falcon as much. We've used the hardware to solve that, and the one place that you may want to look is StreamText. I don't know if you're familiar with StreamText.net. You may be able to stream to it, and from there you can stream to lots of things. Like, so the way StreamText kind of works is you can come in there, you can use it for cart, you can use it for cart is when you have screens in the room, which we don't need right now, but you can do StreamText for that. But you can basically set up a bunch of outputs from it. And I bet you could probably, Vimeo would be one that it could send to. I know that most of the time we've used it to go to YouTube, but you can you can probably set up an output to Vimeo and from there, and then also set up an output from there to Zoom using you probably have to use the key in Zoom, to get access to it. The problem you're going to have with Zoom in that area is that Vimeo is or that you're going to have a delay in StreamText, and then if it's coming through the third-party service inside of Zoom, you get kind of a double AI thing kind of running along. Double machines kind of talking to each other, and it could be a little slow and a little clunky. And so that would be the only thing that I would be concerned about there.
It's interesting that the captioning group prefers to use streaming out of Zoom and then back in. I would just think that, couldn't I just assign them to type captions and then they could type it right within Zoom? But that's not their preference. But yeah, thank you very much. I'll check out StreamText.
Well, a lot of people don't know how to do it. So a lot of people just don't know how to caption straight to Zoom. I'll be honest with you. I don't know exactly how to do it. We know that we can assign a captioner, and we know that on their end, they know how to do it, and they haven't been super open on how they're doing that. But their caption software, I think they're using Eclipse or ProCap, and they're able to push straight into Zoom. And a captioner who knows how to do that, who knows how to caption straight into Zoom without the extra service and the key, that captioning is the best. When you go out to when you have to do the token, it's going out to a third-party service and coming back in. And we find that the carriage returns and the accuracy and there's lots of bugs in that pipeline that don't occur when you have a captioner typing straight into, straight into it. So that's the only thing. Now, and are the people who are captioning for you, are they part of your group? I mean, are they subject experts? Do they understand what they're captioning, or are they just captioning?
Yeah, and we're sending them specific, like, esoteric or complex words ahead of time. So they are a reliable and very great customer service sort of group out of Portland.
Yeah. So, and they want to stream. They want to go into Zoom, or they don't want to go into Zoom.
They want to be in Zoom initially, and then they want us to copy out the API token, and then they want to use their proprietary software to basically do something like rev.com is doing, where it connects to a platform and then it sends captions back into Zoom.
Yeah, that's
it is the iCap network, I think, that they're still connecting with, and that may have something to do with their own personal computer and captioning systems being different than just a regular keyboard. So I don't know.
Usually what happens when I have trouble with that is I start asking for wiring diagrams, or at least ask them, what do you use? And but literally, because I start going up the chain. And with most captioners, I know, so we build databases of our captioners, and we know, like, oh, this captioner has an Eclipse or a ProCap. They're using this hardware, they're using this interface, they're capable of iCap, or they're not. They're, or they're respeakers or whatever. And we know all of those things, because when we have issues connecting, we then say we had an issue. And then there's some captioners that, for instance, that we know that we never have any issues with. And so then when we work with our captioning service, we request them, we want Becky, like if it's a high profile event, we'll experiment with a lot of events, and you can't always get the people you want. So you want to constantly be churning, but we do definitely get to a point where we do request Becky a lot, for high profile events. And so, but that's that's kind of how we approach it. And so, but I think that I would start asking, if they're willing to tell you, I would start asking for what is the hardware, what is the software interface on their PC? Typically it's a PC. So what is the software interface? It's typically going to be Eclipse or ProCap. if it's not one of those, I would be very worried. There's not that many. That's like 99% of the market, and the 1% usually doesn't work very well. But what is their hardware? What is the interface? And then how they're going out. Now, typically both ProCap and Eclipse have 2 outputs. So that captioning software is generally capable of sending to 2 different services at the same time. So we do that a lot, where we have it sent to stream text and have it sent to YouTube, or have it sent back to iCap and sent to YouTube, that type of thing.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Leland? Can't hear you.
Sorry, all my windows closed on a wrong link. I just added a link from the actual source that you're referring to with the Falcon device on how to connect it to Zoom. It sounded like maybe you hadn't done that yet. Have you actually connected it to the Zoom call yet for conference?
Yes, I have. I run test captions through Falcon Classic, and so that's
Okay.
different than Falcon.
Yeah, and I just threw that diagram, the brochure on there so you could take a look at it. The only other thing I would say is if it's captioning it live in the Zoom itself, you could scrape that whole screen out and send it to a live stream, and that would caption the live stream burned in.
Then you're stuck with imagery rather than text. Next question.
Moving on to Laurel Seal in Greensboro. In a Zoom meeting last week, when the host who set the spotlight dropped out, the meeting reverted to active speaker. She would have thought that spotlighting was sticky as long as any co-host remained. Do all hosts and co-hosts have equal spotlighting privileges, or is there some hierarchy?
I think it's all. I think the panelists all have hosts and co-hosts. I think all have the ability to spotlight. I think even the panelists do. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, so in webinar, the co-host will have the ability to spotlight, and it's whoever's first. So if Mickey spotlighted something and then I wanted to re-spotlight, I would take it over. Now, if Mickey was host and then he dropped out and he was set, in her case, to active speaker, it tripped because in the panel, in the participants panel at the bottom, the host has that set to follow host view. And so if it flipped, it passed host to somebody else. Anytime the host drops out, the co-host will take over, and whatever they have that set, it'll default to that.
And I would guess that that's a safety feature, also not a safety feature, but a convenience feature in the sense that it drops to speaker view. Because what if you got locked onto someone dropped out of Spotlight? If the host dropped out and you were in Spotlight and people didn't realize it, like in a webinar, it would just be on that wrong person for a long. I've done that even when I'm here. So, and then you end up with the wrong person on for a long time. So, because people wouldn't be seeing it. So, go ahead, Jeff.
So, Guy, the selection that you have of follow active speaker or follow host view, do you only get that when you're a host, or can you see that as a co-host?
Only host gets it.
So you don't actually have the option to preset it as a co-host. And if you get defaulted to become the new host, then you have to jump and set that.
And you better know what you're doing. Like Bill that one day when Bill got tossed it and he had it set incorrect. So you got to know, kind of prepare your people to. That's the most important thing about webinar, is that little tab in the bottom of the participants area to follow host view or to go to gallery view or active speaker, whichever you prefer.
Nikki?
Yeah, I see that selection of what the attendees see even when I'm co-host. So I don't know if you could check, Guy, because you're a co-host right now. I don't know if you could check if you see that, but I see it even if I'm just a co-host.
Yeah. So yeah, but yeah, I think the spotlight, I think the dropping out is on purpose. Next question.
Maggie Barton Baird of Edmonton, Canada says, any recommendations for a software platform to show movies to a group? Gee, this is a timely topic. I have a client wanting to show the movie AlphaGo for a session for a conference, and I'm unsure if the best way to do this with 400 plus in the audience, and it seems Netflix Party isn't a great fit for this.
I'm not familiar with AlphaGo. I think if it's copyright material, have some issues. Go ahead, Leland.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, but StreamYard just announced after their merger with Hopin that they're going to be allowing full playback of video within their platform very shortly.
Well, but AlphaGo is AlphaGo is Oh,
it'd have to be a private viewing
like
is all, and you couldn't charge for seats or tickets. You'd have to make it something not on a public live stream that people could watch
if
on
we're talking
Facebook or YouTube.
If we're talking
Private
about
The
YouTube
AlphaGo
would
that
work.
I found on IMDb was a documentary on a computer system playing Go that was developed by Google.
right. Yeah, so
it's
if it's a
probably
movie
copyrighted.
and it's copywritten, well, it's it's available on YouTube. Hold on. So it might depend on you'd have to look at what. So I guess what I would say is that assuming that you are, it depends on what you're trying to do. If you have rights to it, we're not going to assume you don't have rights. If you want to play it, you may be someone connected to that or got the approval to do it. You can. The easiest way to do that would be to pull it down using something like Downy 4 or whatever. You can just pull it off of YouTube, so you now have a playback, and then I would play it out I would play it out as part of the event. And you're not going to find that playing it out over Zoom is a great experience because you'll either have low resolution or low frame rate, but you got to choose one of those. So you'd want to figure out how you're going to play it out. Now you can kind of create if you're going to have everyone watching it together, you got to decide what's important, in that interaction. I think that's the big thing is figuring out kind of where it makes sense. Just trying to think through, because playing it out in a movie, you want to play it back to YouTube or to a streaming platform or to something that's going to play full frame rate and relatively good quality. Again, Netflix Party, our experience so far is with 65 people that are fairly technical. Netflix Party was pretty difficult, so I probably wouldn't put it in an event platform right now. Fundamentally, it's too verbose. What Netflix Party is doing is too much chat. We have some ideas on how to fix that, but we haven't implemented them yet. But it's right now Netflix Party. The problem with it is that it's too chatty. It talks back and forth too much, and it does too much confirmation. And it needs a chat. We don't need the chat. So the chat, I think, is like half the problem. is that chat? The chat function is now it might be that it's using that chat as the way to communicate back and forth of where it's at. So maybe using chat to inject the thing, because you'll notice like when someone moves it, it says this person moved it to this time. It may be using that to pass the playhead information back, but it's pretty rocky. If you were in our little test, it took a long time to get people up to speed. We're going to keep on doing it right now until we find a solution, but it's rough. Leland and then Mickey.
There's one other platform I've been following only in the email and on the face of the platform, and that's KAST.GG, which is kind of pivoted into the whole watch party essence now. So you might want to take a look at that and get some feedback on it. I haven't really played with it yet.
Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, definitely I'd play it out at like just any other play out asset into the stream. And if you have like the license to play it out to a large amount of people, then you probably would also have access to get high quality master versions of that.
A lot of times you wouldn't. You'd be surprised. Like you get the people will say it's okay to use and it's on YouTube and go ahead and do it. And trying to get them to actually send you anything better, we've had trouble. We've had people give us access to content and then just download it from YouTube, and they don't want to deal with. They're willing to giving you the access is easy. Giving you the access is easy. Giving you them going through and finding you the file tends to be like, oh, that's something I don't need to do. But what I would say is that the other thing you could do is you could stream it to something so that you sync it up, do a live stream, and let everyone watch it on a second screen. Kind of what we were doing on Sunday is play it out, and then people can talk about it during the event if they want to, or they can just watch it, and then you can talk about it afterwards. So it just depends on what kind of interaction that you want to have during the conference while it's playing. Is everyone just watching passively, or are they actually? And that could probably be either a web page with an embedded link, or a or actually send them to another page to watch it. So there's probably a couple options there, but you could easily build a lot of this into a web page relatively easily so that people just go here and click on it and watch it, probably even with the YouTube video without even downloading it. Next question.
moving on to Doug Ferguson here in the panel from Fort Wayne, longtime panelist. Does PPV, and I'm assuming pay-per-view, really work?
I think it does at scale. There's this, you have to have a certain number of people willing to come. You need the draw for pay-per-view to work. So it's hard. Where we see it not work very well is when people are trying to do it at a small level. I'm going to have, in my local community or a smaller event, pay-per-view can be pretty difficult to get off the ground. If you're doing, a boxing match or something, it works really well. They make a lot of money. Or some kind of fight or some big concert. I mean, there's definitely places where it makes money, but you need to have a strong draw to get people over the hump of actually paying for it. Bill, and then Leland.
Yeah, I think that whole environment is changing a little. I think the first time I ever spent any money for a pay-per-view, it was a Rolling Stones concert on something called On TV back in maybe the 80s or 90s. And it was an okay experience. It wasn't great in terms of video or audio quality, but it was acceptable. Nowadays, you've got all these channels trying to come to me. And my biggest concern is that, a movie comes out, let's say a couple of years ago, Ready Player One or something like that. And I think, oh, it's only there. Should I sign up? Should I do that? Should I do it in the theater? Should I wait? And then over the course of years after that, it's popped around to a couple of other services. And I kept thinking to myself, boy, if I just waited a while, I wouldn't have had to go through those hoops to see it. And so they're conditioning me to think, don't spend, wait, see where this content that starts as premium quality goes really quickly. And will there be a more sensible way to access it if I wait a little bit, which is a bad thing for them, I think.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, it's a bit of, sorry. I thought I was next. I heard my name, so I was ready to blurt out there.
Sorry, go ahead, Courtney. Sorry, and then I'll come back.
Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I don't know if Doug is thinking about doing this for his football games, and so I would think it would be easier because it's an unknown. You don't know how much money you're going to make on a pay-per-view until the event happens. So if you're using it to try and finance it, it's back-end money, and you don't know if it's going to come in or not. I think you'd be better off to find. Sorry about the sirens. You'd be better off to find sponsors willing to back you or back the program and use, offer them sponsorship rather than to go pay-per-view, I would say.
Leland?
I think, Alex, your key point was really where it fits in which niche. I was involved with the info market niche for quite a while, where people did free webinars that introduced paid per-view content. And I think we're going to see a big shift, though, with the way Disney's working now, the way Netflix is working now, all these subscription models that are coming out. Pay-per-view isn't going to be but a secondary thought for people anymore. It's going to be, okay, if I want to watch this person's content, I'm going to have to pay for it. So I think that model is building more momentum as we speak, and people are finding it somewhat intrusive in some niches, but in others it works really well.
You can also have two different versions of the same show. So for instance, one of the things that we've done is have dual streams. One stream is just the dumb stream that goes out. The other one is with expert commentary and, like you have discussion, interaction. That's what they were using, center interaction tools, which is why we were involved. And so you can have, if you really are geeky and you want to have the, about whatever it is, football or soccer or I guess that's the same in some countries, or baseball or basketball or whatever. You can have a bunch of people that are all interacting, talking about it, and you give them a bunch of extra tools, and they're going to pay for that, and they might have access to some experts that are talking and interacting with them. And then you have other ones that are just watching it, and that's free. And maybe you even get a sponsor for that piece. And then you have ones that pay for something a little bit better. Go ahead, Doug.
The Patreon model worked really well in that regard. A lot of people get free content, but then they're directed to the paid stuff.
It is. It's just that you can't. It's hard to do what I'm talking about in Patreon. The Patreon's interaction with audience is very low. That's probably its number one weakness is that it's not very interactive. You can kind of provide extra content to it, but it's not a very interactive platform. Go ahead, Doug, and then Bill.
Yeah, the reason I ask, I appreciate all the feedback. We're quoting a job for a brand new cage fighting MMA type deal. And they don't have the following, I don't think. So for me, I want to educate them hey, start off free, get your fan base, get your thing, and then add some premium content to it, like maybe pay-per-view for the behind the scenes or
an interaction with the fighters. But out of the gate, I just don't think that the pay-per-view model is going to work for them. And I just want some good, support behind that, guiding them on that.
It's just it's really hard to get the draw. It's hard to get something off the ground when you're doing pay-per-view, unless people already have to know kind of what they're going to get before they'll pay for it. So it's a concert or a fight or something where there's a strong draw. So coming out of the gate with pay-per-view I find that, to the point that was made earlier, sponsorship is usually easier to sell than pay-per-view, but sponsorship's hard until you get the number of viewers. So there's a lot of chicken and egg kind of thing. But yeah, pay-per-view is not usually something you can just do, especially at a local level. It becomes really difficult, to get pay-per-view to work. I think that we had actually talked about doing some streaming with some high schools, but the big thing is to try to find lots of businesses that wanted to sponsor it in the local area. A lot of businesses want to be just connected to helping. And so, so you get sponsorships of $200 here and $500 there. And it's like a micro economy that you can kind of work with to find people that want to be part of it. You end up with a lot of little ads, but it could possibly work. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking along the same things. I didn't realize you were talking about something like that. I was thinking high school sports or something like that, which has a built-in parental body. But for something like a fight or something like that, particularly one that's local where you don't have big names, it's all a matter of, can you find the audience? From my advertising days, is there a definable pathway to find the audience? If they're already reading something or going someplace, at least you can start building a list from that. But if you can't figure out how to get a list going that you can mail to, it's really hard to
if you're going to do pay-per-view, you do have to think about Facebook ads. Because that's where, to get to what Bill's talking about at the moment, until it goes away, Facebook ads are lethal. They are just, so what you do is you pound, because you can say, I want just this geographic area, I want this kind of person, I want people who do this. Your ability to carve that out, it'll carve out the 3,000 or 4,000 people, and you can make sure that they see an ad every day, if they go to Facebook. And that's the kind of thing you'll have to do to prime the pump, I think, is expect to invest in advertising. And Facebook and Google, Facebook is probably the best advertising platform for that type of thing. Let's go to the next question.
Here's Joa Marie. And the question is Monday superior to Asana as a workflow tool?
And I have the advantage of knowing Ajwa. Ajwa is the correct pronunciation.
Thank you.
So I don't really know. I haven't really used Asana or Monday that much. So I'm not probably the best person to. Does anyone else have an opinion about the two of them? Go ahead, Jesse.
Use Asana a lot, and tasks and various project elements are pretty buried in there, so not excellent.
Yeah, I've never actually talked to someone that uses Asana that liked it, but I'm still working. I'm still talking to people about it. Go ahead, Brian.
At work, we use something called Workfront, which is just bought by Adobe. So that might have some interesting things in the future.
Yep. Yeah. Next question.
Maggie Barton Baird from Edmonton, Canada is back with, what do you recommend for staying in communication with a speaker during a virtual session when they are not directly with the rest of the production team?
Go ahead, Mickey.
Tucker,
yeah. Well, so with the speaker, it's specific. So the way we do it, because we isolate, so there's a couple different ways to do that. One is that we can isolate their connection. We isolate everybody's connection. So then we can talk back to any of them at any point in time during the show, because their audio, we're not sharing the virtual event platform, so it's not a shared audio system. So I can talk back to them, outside of that. And I can talk to any of the panelists that way. So that's how we approach it.
Someone not in production, though. They're referring to someone that's not with the production team. So
right. Well, I'm saying that I said in a virtual session when they're not directly with the production, if they're not in the same room, is what I'm reading. How I'm reading that. So the second way to do that, of course, is a phone call. I'm just trying to. The simplest way to do it is you let them put an earpiece into their other ear, and you let them call in to a number that they can just. Now you're on a phone call. It's just a bridge, and so that we've definitely used that when necessary. Now, what Mickey was referring to is Tucker. You can give them, they can install Unity or ClearCom has a more advanced version of Unity that you can use to do that. And so, but yeah, so then what happens is you can talk to them, you can set up teams where people can talk to them and activate and turn it on and off, and you guys can all have conversations. I think that definitely for getting started, Unity is the solution, and Tucker is the provider of that solution. Tucker's in our group. You can find him in Discord, but don't try to figure out Unity on your own. Like, get used to using it. It's very inexpensive. It's relatively inexpensive to have Tucker just set it up for you, and get used to using it, and then you can start building on your own. But you probably won't. Like, I don't even, if I have to build a Unity setup, I just hire Tucker to do that. Now we have in our system, we have a ClearComm system, which is a much more expensive and much more robust platform than Unity, but we can't use it all the time. So Unity is what we use when we're not doing that. And I think those are the two best online comms platforms that you can use. Go ahead, John, and then Jesse.
When Tucker sets this up for us, he splits it, more than bifurcates into channels, which Guy just showed there. And so, my team's on one channel, talent's on a completely different channel. Yep. So you don't have crosstalk between the channels. And that really was super effective.
There you go, Jesse.
Has anyone tried the Zello app? Zello comms app?
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I've tried it. It's a bit more has a bit more latency than Unity, and also the support for like Bluetooth controls isn't really there compared to Unity.
Next question.
Moving on to Trevor Walker of Rosamond, California, who asks, would an M1 Mac Mini be powerful enough to run a live stream on YouTube using Mimo Live that has video coming from an Atem and audio coming from an RX-18 over USB?
Oliver, how's the performance on the M1?
The M1 is great, but we don't support Mimo Live on the M1 yet fully, so I'm not sure if I would recommend that. So I'm running it on an M1 right now, and I do some tests, and it looks great, but we have to do some work.
How far out do you think the Mimo Live for the M1 is?
Well, first of all, I can't answer that because there's a lot of third-party components that we need to update to M1 before we can move to native M1 support. And our goal is now to have it run on Rosetta, which isn't not so. It's not taking a very big performance penalty. So. It's still going to be very fast, and if you compare it to an Intel-based Mac Mini, so it's probably not as fast as it could be, but it's fast enough. So, but as you can see, sometimes the image is jerking a little bit, and I had this problem with the audio earlier. I had to switch the audio because my favorite audio device doesn't have compatible drivers yet and things like that. So I would not recommend it for serious production right now. If you're just goofing around or playing around or experimenting or learning, then it's good, but not for production.
Great. Thanks, Oliver. It's nice having the developer on the show.
Yeah.
It makes it easier to answer those questions accurately.
That's authoritative.
Next question.
Moving on to James Babbitt here in San Diego. Hosts working from home sometimes have a mural-sized photograph of their regular studio as a background. Is there a service that makes large photo enlargements for backgrounds, like Billie Eilish at home with a tiny desk concert background? That was a little beyond a photo, but yeah.
I mean, there's definitely large format services. I don't know of any specifically, but you can definitely get them printed. You send them out, and it's just a matter of figuring out what size you want to use. Go ahead, Leland.
As one who's worked with large format printers for most of my life, you can go to just about any printing house, Speedy Printing, any of those side shops that you find downtown, ask them, send them a PDF or an online file of their choice, JPEG, PNG, whatever, and they can usually print up to 48 inches wide by whatever length you need on roll stock. So get a hold of your local printer.
And think about it sideways. So 48 inches is not enough wide to get away, but it probably is enough long, or enough. It's enough high, but not enough wide. So you want to think about having your mural going down that. Don't use the 48 as your width. You want to use it as your height. and then
There
I would
could be
consider,
larger. There could be larger
Yeah.
printers nowadays that I'm not familiar with, but the limit at the time I was printing full on was about 48 inches.
You can tile. You can tile and go 4 or 5.
Yeah, you could do that too.
Yeah.
You
Sure.
can. I
Wallpaper it.
just don't like tiles. Anyway, so the tiles are just hard to deal with once you get them. Making it look seamless and trying to minimize the jankiness of the process if unless you really have a good way to affix them behind you. So I would try to go for a minimum of 5 feet high and a minimum of 7 feet wide. Like that just gives you enough room to put something back there and get it far enough back. What's the bummer about putting those kind of murals behind you is when you get too close to them and your shadow drops on them, because it doesn't look at all like the shadow. You kind of lose the effect pretty fast if your shadow hits the wall. So that's the thing to kind of think about there.
And make sure to get those printed on a matte finish, not a gloss finish, because you will not want that reflection from the gloss finish.
Absolutely. Next, and by the way, when you move it further back, it's going to drop more out of focus, which means that it'll look better, because the imperfections of what it is start to drop out. The other thing to know is that I don't use mural backgrounds. If you can afford it, I use big TVs. And those big TVs have gotten less expensive, and you don't need anything more than a 1080. 4K makes it much better because you might see some array in the 1080. But a 70-inch TV behind you is lethal, because now you can change it to whatever you want. Like you just have a computer that's, I had a Mac Mini in my other office that had a 70-inch monitor behind it, and I just changed the background to whatever I want it to be. And that's how Insert Studio. So basically all of broadcast, when you watch all those talking heads on the Sunday morning, they're all sitting in front of a TV. Go ahead, Mickey, Barry, and Bill.
Yeah, and I would assume that the rules for virtual backgrounds with green screens would also apply, like say same focal length, same angle, same height, so
absolutely.
that it looks more realistic.
Yeah, I'm going to move on because we're over time, and I'm trying to be better about this. So we're going to get the last 2 questions out of the way because I don't want to come back to them. So next question.
Okay, well, we're in the James Babbitt ones. We got Aaron Wetzel from Des Moines, Iowa. How are you handling network traffic within your internal network to ensure bandwidth and traffic during an event? Are you using multiple VLANs and or separate VLANs per computer? Do you have a separate VLAN just for downloading content?
Well, definitely we build a lot of VLANs. So that's, you want protected content, and you have to decide how much you're going to give to everything. The streaming obviously gets a priority. But we build separate VLANs for the staff that's going to be managing content, the stream, the general public, and you have to make decisions about it. And there's a lot of jockeying for who needs what. But streaming is a pretty hard number, like what you need. And then the uploads and downloads is just a matter of your performance of how far you can go. And then you give but we might have, on some of our events, we might have 10 or 15 different VLANs that are floating around that are, the press gets a VLAN and this gets a VLAN, and you cut everybody up so that they're not stepping on each other, in that area. The problem with VLANs is that you could end up with a lot of excess where someone's not getting the bandwidth that they need and nobody's using the other ones. So you don't want to cut it up too tightly because you just end up with a lot of unused space. So that's the downside of VLANs, but you definitely, I think minimum 2 or 3 that we use, and probably maximum 10 or 15 on some of the events that we do. Go ahead, Leland, real quick.
Quick question for you. What's the nominal breakdown that you experience when you include another VLAN on a network? What's the split on the bandwidth that you experience?
The bandwidth that we want is for our live stream is we calculate what the upstream is and then we double it. Like that's, like if we think we're going to need 8 megs or 10 megs or 15 megs, then we ask for 30,
what I'm
whatever
referring
double
to,
is.
As you create a virtual network, don't you divide the bandwidth that you have available and limit that to the virtual network? It can only access like a certain portion of that.
Yeah, so that's what
anyway.
If we have 100 megs and my streaming needs 30, I slice off 30. And then I give everything.
So you
back.
can designate how much it's actually taking. Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, so that's the whole thing is you carve it off, and we ask for it. If we go into a thing where someone else is managing it, we definitely say, hey, I need a separate VLAN. like it's not, yeah. So anyway, so we're going to move on to the keynote and graphics. And we talked about this and people were requesting it. So I thought I would kind of walk through a little bit of how to use Keynote, and specifically with lower thirds, but I'm sure you can imagine using it for other things. This is going to be specifically with an Atem switcher, but you could use it with a lot of other things. You could use it with Mimo Live or vMix or I don't know, Keynote and vMix would be interesting. Anyway, but it's just video out. Not using key fill. Keynote doesn't do key fill. So this is just understanding how to use the Luma key to actually pull your keys to make that work. So anyway, so let me show you. I have one that I kind of built real quickly, and then we'll back up and do it. And then also we'll jump into questions after I kind of do a little bit of a precursor to it. So here, if I turn, let me get my, and I'm not saying that Keynote is the be all end all of a graphics program, but it is free. And the interesting thing about Keynote is there's just a ton of built-in, which I'll show you, but there's a ton of built-in animation capabilities that just make it that you can just kind of throw something together real quickly, and so it's just something that you can pop something out and have it all work in a relatively easy way. So if I turn this on right now, you see my whole interface. Hold on, let me hit play. Let's see. Okay, so if I hit too many buttons. Okay, so if I now turn the key on, you'll see a key. Now, this is just using Keynote, and we'll do an animation with it in a second, but this is just using Keynote. It is a, you have a name there, and, I can play with it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm playing with the clipping of the key, and it's funny, I don't have a way. I just realized I don't have a way to trying to think if I can do this quickly. No. Okay. I didn't think about having to show you. I'll do a screen capture of the Atem. I realized I should have been able to show you both of these at the same time, and so what I'm doing. But what I'm gonna kind of we'll jump into a screen share here for just a second. All right. So what I'm doing here is, of course, I have an on-air graphic that's here. If I turn it off, my graphic goes off, and I'm using the downstream key. So you'll see inside of the palettes, there's the upstream key, and then there is the downstream key. And the way I'm working on this right here is that I'm saying my fill source is my camera 2, which happens to be where I'm feeding in the HDMI out of my computer. And so is my key source. So I'm using the same image for my key source as my fill source. And now normally what you would do is if you had key fill output, this would be a separate output that's coming out from whatever graphics playout that I'm doing. But you can do it with Memo this way. And then what I can do is when I turn it on, I can start to play with the clip is going to be where it's going to cut. And then the gain is going to be kind of how hard it pushes that edge. And you'll see that, and I'll go back to me in a second. So let me stop sharing here, and we'll go back to this, and I'll start playing with this a little bit. So you can see that I can start playing with those transparencies. Now, what I'm looking for when I'm playing with this is see how my actual video starts to go dark. That's because it's now bringing that black into it, and it's just over pure black. And you can get away with, again, a fair bit of fiddling here, and you can get into things where you can have it, let's say, so there's a very transparent, and because that's a darker color, I can actually nail that. I can create a very semi-transparent. A lot of people think that when they're using something like Keynote or a Luma key, they can't get that transparency, but they actually can, and so, but you'll also know that here I have a transparency background because it's a slightly darker color. I haven't impacted my text at all. So that's also something to kind of consider is that you can, by using slightly darker colors, as you start to pull this gain in the clipping, and that's really where you're playing with it. Now I can also hit pre-multiply key and it'll do something like this. So this is it's actually using the Luma information from the second channel as the key, and it'll just do that as well. So you don't need to make any of those adjustments, but if you want to make finer adjustments, this is how you do it. And then what's nice about it is that you can see it disappear there, but here's the kind of there's my little lower third. and that takes like a second to do. So, and then you say, okay, and then I want it to fade out. So I'm going to show you a little bit about how to do that in it. But it's not necessarily difficult. It is. I guess I realized I could.
Where is that pre-multiplied checkbox? Was that on the Atem?
It's in the downstream key.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, so it's right above your clip and gain controls. You just hit that, and it'll grab onto the Luma information from that one. And it may not be what you want, but you can. A lot of times you can kind of play with that and end up with something that, especially if you're using white text. White text works really well with the way that I use it. So when you start getting more creative with those texts, things get harder. But if you use white text, you can do all kinds of stuff on the background, and it'll just simply key over it. So so that tends to be a reasonably good solution for that. Does anyone have any questions before I?
Yeah, can you make sure you tell us when you're adjusting clip and when you're adjusting gain?
Yep. Let me go ahead and
affecting what.
Here, it's hard because you have to kind of turn it. Oh, wrong computer. Hold on. All right, so let's turn this on. So here I'm playing with my clip, and here I'm playing with my gain. Now each one of these operates differently depending on where I go. So if I turn my gain all the way up, what'll happen is, everything jumps really fast because clip is moving that endpoint, right? So when I set my gain to 100%, what you're seeing is everything is either on or it's off. It's not. There's no fine. The clip is basically because it's moving. The clip. I have a better example of this that I should have used. That is, we'll talk about this again. But the clip is basically moving along. It's basically pushing that endpoint of along the black levels. The gain is how hard that edge is. And so as I open up that gain, now you'll see it's still pretty. But if I bring my gain really low, now I have a lot of the clip is. And what I do here is I can put the clip down here, for instance, and I can move the gain, up here, and I can move my clip up a little bit. But now that the gain is very low, right now it's at 12%, I have a lot more. Now I'm moving it. So the gain right now is at, let's say, 22%. And my clip, you can see it, you can see where it affects me, but you can see that it's not jumping anymore. I have lots of fine control because the gain is low. I have lots of fine control over exactly where it's moving transparency around. Everything's not on or off. So by setting your gain at a low level instead of a high level, now if you want things to just be on or off, you can do that. But by setting the gain at a low level, you can have a more refined, more refined way to set up semi-transparencies. And again, that's where a lot of us didn't have key fill until recently. So, I mean, in the event world, I think they're still using Luma, for a lot of things. And so we got pretty good at using these Luma tools just to kind of pull it in. And again, I'm not saying that this is a solution. There are better solutions. Memo Live does key fill output. Pro Presenter does key fill output. There's lots of things that you can buy. QLab does key fill output. So there's lots of things that you can buy that will do key fill. But if you're looking for something that you're getting started, you want to do lower thirds, you have a computer but no money, you have an iPad like this. Well, once I've set it up, I will say building these in iPads is really a pain. But you can play it out from an iPad. So once I save this out, I could use an iPad to actually play these graphics out. And this, I'm using a lower third, but it could be anything. That you're kind of, any kind of graphic that you want to throw over it. It's just a matter of understanding that gain is going to give you that more fine control, and then clip is going to decide where you're keying it in that area. And what you're looking for is when I turn it off, when I turn it on and off, I'm looking for the background. That's me changing in luminance. Like, I don't want the lower third to suddenly make me darker. So that's that's what you're looking for there. So, So let's talk a little bit about what the build looks like and how that gets built in that process. So I'm gonna we'll jump to here we go, and so we'll hit escape, and you should see my screen. And by the way, are people seeing 1080p? So it should be pretty. The screen should look pretty sharp. Yeah, okay.
Looks good here.
So anyway, so let's just start over again rather than using any of this stuff here. So we'll just delete it. And, so all I'm going to do, and this is why, again, I tend to tell people to do this because it's so easy to use. And a lot of people are already using Keynote. And so it's relatively easy for them to learn, and it's also, relatively inexpensive. So here's a rounded corner box. I can decide how rounded by kind of moving these around here. I can simply stretch it out like this, and I can put it where I want it to be. I can go into my format and say I want this to be blue. That's what we had before. And I can also give it things like I could go in and say I want the border to have a line. Let's make that line white. Oops, not that. The border is a line, and then
do you care about title safe anymore?
No, I don't.
Copy that.
It's not my target audience. So here's a nice white border. So when you're Luma keying, lighter colors are better. So a black border will just tend to key out, whereas a white border gives you a little something to work with. It'll kind of create a nice delineation in that process. And so here's my here's what I have here. I'm going to add some text. So I'm going to say this is Lindsay, and I might want to double click on that and make it bigger. I'm just hitting Command plus to make it bigger. I'll hit bold. So there's my name. A lot of times in broadcast, we capitalize the last name. So we'll do that. It's kind of a accepted nomenclature. And then we'll call it Chief Troublemaker. And we'll throw it in there. And we'll go into our, rather than bold, we'll go to medium, and we'll maybe make it, let's try 30 instead, not 390. There we go. So we can do that. And we could even say, oh, we want to have let's see, we can go into shapes. There's a lot of shapes inside of Keynote that are kind of pre-built for you. The other thing to know is that it is a pain, but you can take AI files. There's a little free app that will let you take AI files and import them as your own shapes. And you can also define shapes in here, so you can kind of build your own. But it is a little bit of a pain to do that. But you can, but we can grab this, or we could say, well, we'll just say radioactive, right? Put it over here. Okay, so now the first thing I probably want to do is just hit play. And this is where, before you start animating or doing anything else, you're going to want to see does it actually, work. So what we'll do is we'll go back to mine and we'll key it over, and we'll take a look at it and just say, does this, and I'm going to pin it so I can actually see what I'm doing here. Hold on. So, you can see that there's a little bit of transparency by using those lighter images. I'm able to kind of grab onto it, so I can, but you can see how right here, and again, I could make that outline could be a little darker, but you can see how I've made kind of a nice, because that text is white. And again, you're designing this inside of your, the limitations of your software. So you're not, this isn't the be all end all lower third, tool. It is a reasonably good tool that's really easy to use, that has some limitations. And if you know how to work around them, you get a pretty good result. So anyway, so the result that I'm getting here is that I've got a nice semi-transparent blue. But I still have readable text in front of it. Now that text may have some issues around readability and this is where things get a little difficult, is if you want to put this over a light background and you want a dark outline to it, it becomes a little bit harder to, make that work with your key, so you have to kind of play with that process. But while it's open like this, and you can, if I hit, I'll still see it keyed. You'll see the rest of my interface here. It's kind of a cool interface here, but I can still see what my key looks like, as I make adjustments. So I can go in here and I can select, oops, I actually want to have that open. And I can select my blue, for instance, and say, well, I'm going to make it darker. I'm going to make my blue, we'll go back to lighter. So there it is, semi-transparent. But like, for instance, I may want a shadow. So I'll say I want a drop shadow there. Now that shadow, that's the problem where things can get a bit, it can be a little bit, no, that drop shadow is not going to make any difference. Sorry about that. Let me go back to this. There's no shadow here. what I might want though is I may want to select my name and give it a border. So a border or a shadow. We'll say a drop shadow here. Now you can see that it's still showing up in our, the black there is still showing up in our key, but this is where you'll start to get kind of into because what I think is actually happening there is it's still transparent, like there is still a little bit of a shadow separating it out. But you have to be you can kind of play with this separation there. So there's still a lot of pieces that you can do here as far as the key goes. And let's go ahead and hit, I'm going to hit play so that we see what it looks like. So you can still see that key, but you'll see that shadow is not nearly as effective because it's semi-transparent. What we usually use that for is to do it. So there are some limitations. You're adding something to the background as opposed to, and again, you can, what will help is playing around with the key to make it, more, like for instance here, you can decide how transparent that background is in what you're doing. So, so that's kind of the thought process there. It would be really nice. I've asked the Keynote team for key fill for a long time, maybe a decade. So,
and when you hit play, that's the Atem.
Well, nothing. Yeah. When I hit play, then you're just seeing it keyed over. Right now we're in Keynote because we're basically taking.
Right.
I'm just getting a screen capture until I go there. Now the next thing is what makes this kind of fun is, sure, you can build a lower third, but you could do that in Photoshop. You could do that in a lot of other things. The thing that makes it nice is that I can go into. It's kind of cool to see the interface. We'll do this for a while until something breaks, but it's kind of cool for you to just see the interface over top of me.
Yes.
So what you can do is you can group all these together, but we're not going to do that. What we're going to do is we're going to take this one here and we're going to say, I want to animate it. And in that animation, I'm going to say, now you have all these and you don't have to figure out how, how to do this. Now we'll make this one let's see here. That's a build in. Let's say we want to move in. So that's what we kind of want that to do. And we can decide whether we want to bounce or not, but we'll leave it the way it is. And then we want, let's say we get my name and we want to, let's see. So that's probably a little too much. Probably more than what we, maybe it's what you want there, but I could have it spin in. So again, these are all things that I don't know what cube actually, that's kind of fun. So we'll leave it there. So we'll have it cube out and then we'll have Chief Troublemaker just dissolve in like that. And then we're going to have this actually, let's see, we're going to have it fade and scale. So it goes like that. So maybe we'll speed it up a little bit and hit a preview. So it just kind of pops up. So again, these would typically be things you did a lot of keyframes for, to do. So we have that all set up. Now, what we have to do is set the order. So this is order 1. This is order 2, order 3. And what I'm looking at right here is this order right here that I have it in. So what order do I want? And then what I can do is set my build order. So here I have these. So I have this move in. This next one I can say build with. But what I'm going to say is I'm going to say build after 1. And then I want this one to build with 2. And I want the radioactive to build after 3. All right. So now by setting this relationship, when I hit it, when I go, it's going to pull this out and swing in and then pop it up. And so you've kind of built a little bit more of a complex, interface to do that. I'll hit it again. So you can kind of see that. And again, I did that really fast, and a lot of the ease in, ease out, all those other things. So if you're getting started, this isn't, again, I can do a lot more in motion, to build something. I can build there's other things I can do that are a lot more control. But as you can see, there are a ton of things. Now I can also then go in and go, well, how do I want to build out? And this might be something simpler. Like I can just go, I want to dissolve. Oops, let's see here. I'm going to delete that. I'm going to go in and select my main piece here. And I'm going to say, I'm going to go to my build out and I'm going to say, I just want this to dissolve away. Right. and then I'm going to take this one, and I'm going to also say that I'm just going to have it dissolve out. And then I'll take this last one, and I'm going to say the same thing. I'm going to take this and say I want it to dissolve out. And then with my radioactive, I'll go to build out, and I will
slide left.
What
well,
does the flame look like?
Well, so if you look at this, hold on. So watch. We'll do flame next. Yeah, flame could be really interesting. But I'm gonna take this, and I'm gonna say I want this one to go with 5, this one to go with 5, and then this one to go after 7, right? So now, so you can see how you can kind of create a, you can, so if I hit play, so my first hit is this popping out and swinging out like that, right? And then when I want it to go away, I just go, and then it goes, it disappears. If you wanted to do that kind of thing, but the point is that those are things that would take you longer than it just took me to build nice little animated pieces. And it can be stills, animated, whatever. But it's a relatively simple way to do it, and the graphics look fairly clean. The nice thing about Keynote is that it just looks nicer. Like the kerning and the word spacing and the alignment tools and all the other things just tend to make you tend to throw things together in Keynote that look nicer than a lot of other platforms. Let's go ahead and look at let's see what we had a request for flame. Let's see, was it flame?
I'm still trying to.
That's good. Like, hold on. Let's read that. Yeah, so that's fun, and there's lots of, let's see, that's a little weird, but there's tons of these little things that you can.
Wow,
that's kind of cool. I hadn't seen that one before, actually. Trace. So it's
still trying to get my head around the nomenclature of build, and then as you were talking about alignment and grids, are there
yeah, so when you grab onto these,
do they snap?
Yeah, they tend to snap to things that you have there. They'll tend to line up. Like this one, when I move it, it just it's snapping to the middle of that. And it just kind of, you just end up with there's a lot of snapping. so you can snap things very quickly to each other, and it'll all line up, kind of nicely. And it tends to draw well. So
text is often, or say if you wanted to make sure your Alex Lindsay and your logo, the tops, is there an alignment tool to?
Well, you would typically then start, opening up a ruler and then pulling, like this would be kind of the,
sure. Yeah.
We pull down a ruler or something like that to, to make sure that things are lined up the way we want them to. So rulers are useful as far as that's just Command R, and then I just pull the ruler out.
Yep.
And so, but that's anyway, but there's lots of these cool little graphics that would be, again, not a replacement for everything else, but there's a lot of great tools inside of Keynote that you can start animating and putting those graphics in, and then you end up having something that you can kind of throw together, and then if
add annoying sound effects like Fox Sports to each the animation.
I think you can actually. I don't know if you can add audio to.
You'd have to add another automation, right, to play sound.
And I'm kind of curious about this. Let's see. Jiggle. I'm kind of curious. I don't actually. Oh, that's funny. So I'm not even sure what that. Let's see what that's on click. But I could do an after build for. Let's see what happens there. This is not even something I've used before. So it pops out, swings out, and then stops. So, and again, for anybody who's done that in an animation tool, that takes longer than adding these. And sure, it's something that is, all of this stuff is stuff, even like that little trace out, just the idea that I can throw up and use all these things as a beginner step, to what I'm doing. It's kind of useful. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah. I, I'm not familiar with Keynote. Are you able to export QuickTimes out of it? And if so, would it be a viable option to like export QuickTimes, bring them into QLab, do the same Luma key?
Yep.
And will that work? Oh,
Or you can even ProRes 4x4.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say is if you want to take these out, you can export these with transparency. If your background is set to transparent, you can send it out to Memo, you can send it out to QLab, you can send it out to anything. So you can send the Apple ProRes 4x4 out of Keynote. So all of the stuff that I just built, you could key properly with a key fill if you have something that's key fill. So you can, it's not just that I'm showing you how to do it live from Keynote because that doesn't cost anything, but you can absolutely use many tools. You could use Keynote as your lower third / sweeper / graphics generator. And it'll get you a long way pretty quickly. Go ahead, Chris. I can't hear you, Chris.
So frustrating that it can generate an alpha channel.
We just can't do key fill,
but it won't send it out live.
Yeah. Yeah, I've mentioned it. So Mickey.
I'm just looking at your current frame, Alex, and it looks like you have like a cool Iron Man heads-up display kind of.
I've never done this before, but I kind of like it. Like I was like, I could teach Keynote with if I thought about this well enough. I'm
going to do this daily now.
Yeah, exactly. I can.
That's I guess an advantage of dark mode.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Go ahead, Sky.
You said you can import graphics, as in, and is it what file formats? Is it targets, TIFFs, EPS?
Yeah, all of those.
All of those. Okay.
Yeah, and you can, so one of the cool things is that, if
particularly a logo, corporate logos are things you're going to have to bring in.
Yeah, well, what's kind of cool is that you can also, let's see if I can do this quickly. A lot of times you have to worry about copyright, but we're just going to do it anyway. So telephone, just search for a telephone. I'll look for images. I will find a telephone over, let's say a telephone over here. Now this one already came in. This is already that's already a ping. Let's see here. So,
I use Noun Project a lot for this, and that's dirt cheap, just for those who are wondering.
But that's a ping. But if I wanted to kind of grab one. Here's one that's just a JPEG.
There you go.
This is where things get more interesting. So the one thing you can't do for some reason recently, you can't drag from Chrome into Keynote. You get the link rather than the things. You have to drag it to something and then drag it into Keynote. So if I drop this in, I have this. That's fine. So there's my graphic. But the cool thing that Keynote has that does better than I think any of the other ones is I can go into, I can select this guy and go to image and say Insta Alpha and just go, whoop, I would like that to be an alpha channel. I would like this to be an alpha channel. I would like this to be an alpha channel. And you might have to go through
it first. That might have been.
Yeah, exactly. But if I turn off, let me turn off the key and just cut to it. You'll see that it does a pretty good job of, and when I hit done, there it is. And so, that's over black, which is probably the least, but it'll cut it out really nicely. So it's alpha channel solution. So it's really fast. And if you have a ping, of course, and if I drag it in, it's going to come in with its alpha channel. And what's funny is that the ping that had its own transparency actually doesn't look as good as the one that Keynote created from the phone, just on its own. So, anyway, so you can build transparencies in Keynote really, really fast. And that definitely makes the process much easier to kind of put that stuff together. Anyway, that's kind of what I was going to show as far as just kind of getting people started with it, but I can answer some questions. So do we have questions, Bill? A couple of them?
We do. We have actually about 6 of them. The first one comes to us from Andrew Moyer, and Andrew asks, are there any workarounds to editing slides in Keynote while you are presenting?
Yeah, that's the problem. So that definitely is the limitation of Keynote is that when it's presenting. That's what it's doing. You can't edit them. So that's when you start getting a more robust platform, is when you're actually, a real graphics platform is going to let you work on stuff live while you're still working on something else. So that's where Keynote doesn't. That's the limitation of a free app that does a lot of other things but doesn't do that. The way we have done that in the past is that we use 2 machines for Keynote. So having 2 laptops there with the same deck. And then what we do is we jump back and forth between them and key one or the other. I haven't done it with the Atem Mini, but we used to do it with a big switcher where we had extra inputs, and we just have 2 of them be the inputs. And then we were able to just jump back and forth between them and make edits as we needed. And that gave us a lot of flexibility to make that work. Go ahead, Courtney, and then Mickey.
Does Keynote support dual screen output, so you could have your interface on one and the output screen on the second?
Yeah. You can definitely see what the next slide is. You can have an interface. You can, I don't know how I can do that with the way I have this set up, but you can definitely get a second screen where there's a speaker view. But in that speaker view, you don't have any editing tools, so you can't edit the slides, but you can see them. So you can see what's next. You can see this list of slides. You have show notes. You have other things like that on that other screen. Go ahead, Mickey.
And I guess like if you do that, switching between 2 computers, that would be a good. If you have a bigger switcher, but don't have enough inputs for some reason, I guess that's a good use for an Atem Mini to just
You
do
could.
the switch.
Yeah, you could add an Atem Mini as a
two.
pre-edit edit.
Like a sub mixer kind of.
Yeah, you could do a
thing.
sub mixer. That way you could be an operator just switching between your presentations. The other thing about that's nice is being able to preload presentations. We've had up to 4 inputs that were keynotes so that we could be preloading stuff that people were bringing in and working on them while one's running. And that made things a little bit easier, but it gets to be a little hectic as well. Go ahead, Jeff.
Sorry, where did you end up on your clip and your gain, and are you pre-multiplied?
It's not pre-multiplied.
I was playing along on my Atem Mini.
Yep. Yeah. So
even that flame seemed to key pretty well.
Yeah. So my clip is at 39.2 and my gain is at 25.3. Yep, absolutely. And I'd love to say that I have some formula for that, but that's definitely something that I just kind of move the sliders until I'm happy. But I do know that I know what each slider does. The gain is creating the width of my transition, and the clip is deciding where the center point of that transition is. So if you imagine a gradient coming from where your clip is, as you move the clip back and forth, it's saying this is the center of where this on this side is going to be clipped, and how wide that barrier is the gain. So that's you want to think it was kind of the contrast of the transition across that Luma key. The next question.
And it happens to come from Jeff Francis. Client is providing event graphics via PowerPoint. How well does Keynote convert PowerPoint decks?
Kind of. So I'd say about 30%, 40% is come in clean. If they add any animations or do anything goofy with PowerPoint, it blows up. It really just comes in as all kinds of different things. So if people who are actually good at PowerPoint are the hardest to get slides from. The raw stuff's there. I will say that in general, because when people are just making image slides, it goes in okay. You do have to, we just plan to know that we're going to do some reformatting if we're going to do it. And that was the secret for events for very many years, probably at least a decade, was that almost every company that was doing the events for all these companies were using Keynote. And they would, if you gave them PowerPoint, they would take your PowerPoint, but then they'd never tell you, they would just convert your whole thing to Keynote. And this was even including companies that make the presentation software, their stuff was being converted to Keynote because the production company just knew that Keynote would work better and look better, and it would render better than and be more stable than PowerPoint. And so I think that there was a kind of a big shift where everyone realized it all. It seemed like all at once, and everyone was like, no, you can't use Keynote for that. But anyone, it's not. Almost everybody who is a major corporation that's using a presentation and is not Microsoft or Google is using Keynote. Barry and then Jeff.
And the answer is mostly no, but sometimes if you get them to export it as JPEGs, then you've got no problem bringing it in.
Yep,
then
you're right, Barry.
Image and you can't change it. But fonts are a big gotcha also. It's not just animation, but it's fonts and also the keying also that you were showing a while ago.
Yeah.
Sometimes on Windows, it's really horrible.
Yep. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
So if they're making a PowerPoint deck and we're going to use that for lower thirds and not convert to Keynote, but just run it in PowerPoint, I'm assuming we can still do the Luma key if they do white over black.
You can absolutely use PowerPoint for it.
How simple instructions should I give them? Can I go farther than white over black?
I would give them a template.
I'm doing blue over black. You know, I mean, it is. I mean, what I would do is what I would do is have them send me one, and then I'll send it back. I'll say, oh, I made a couple adjustments. If you can use this as a template, like I would go in and key it, get it to a point where I knew I liked it, and then hand it back to them and have them build the rest of them that way. I mean, that would be probably how I'd approach that, because there's not a lot of rule. I mean, you can do red and you can do blue and you can make them darker and lighter. It just depends on what you're trying to achieve, you know? And so the one thing that does work really well is white text, you know, or lighter text, because it's easier to keep it that way. What happens is that when you keep the things that they have to read as bright as possible, you're giving yourself as much range as possible to make fine adjustments to the background, so that, you know, the reason I tend to use light outlines and I tend to use text is because it creates a nice little, like, it just looks nice, and it lets me just do that semi-transparency that no one thinks you can do with a Luma key, but I'm still protecting all that text, you know. And so that's kind of, you know, if you go with darker text, it becomes much more complicated, you know, like it's much tweakier. Mine is I'm cheating because I'm just using white text or very light text, because that where that center is of that clip and the width of that doesn't matter as much because it's so far off on one side. Go ahead, Courtney.
Can you do more complex animations like you'd do in After Effects, where you'd like you'd have a still of an image that's actually a video, and then start playing and then zoom
It's
full screen?
staggering. It is staggering, truly, what you could do in Keynote.
I don't know if I'm really set up to do some of this, but there's tons of animation tools in Keynote. Like it's probably more animation tools than anywhere else, any other presentation tool.
Okay with playing out video with audio, you know, sync,
yep,
speeds up the audio, etc.
Yeah, it's not as good as a dedicated playout engine. So a QLab or something else is going to play the frame rate. The frame rate will be more consistent, but Keynote does a pretty good job of doing it. Lawrence and then Brian.
Yeah, I can share some sophisticated animation of charts if I'm allowed. If I can share my screen, if there's time for that.
Yeah.
So share screen. So desktop.
And then after Lawrence, we'll go back to getting through the questions.
Yeah, I'll keep it brief, very briefly. So here is like, let's see. It's like this is a graphic I made, and this let's play it in window. No. So play. So this is why is this not showing my? Okay, I don't see.
Another screen.
Do you see it now?
Yep.
Okay, so this is flowcharts, and this is all made with individual pieces that were imported. They were made in.
But all the animation you're doing there is in.
Yeah, this is all done in Keynote.
Right.
And then here is another nice one. No, this is another one here. So this is just 5 graphics, and the motion and the speed ramps. It's all just coming together.
And you did the design and all the animation?
Yes, I designed these in Affinity Designer, and then I made the slide decks.
And what did you export them out as?
This is PNGs. So like here, and I make so these are all like individual pieces, and they snap into place. You know, they're just made out of I just exported. Let me show you the short design. So this is basically an Affinity photo, different pieces.
And with the one that's spinning, the two that come together, I don't know how that worked. So how the two that kind of came in as a sandwich, how did you animate those?
So if we go to the animation of this slide of these pieces, we go to the build order. This is let's see which one that was. That were probably that's cube, I think. That's cube. Let's see.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So yeah, this is cube in. So I don't know if I can. Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's hard to go through it, but it's basically a cube transition.
Yep.
So this is a scale.
Mm-hmm.
This is a cube transition. This is a rotating of the group.
Mm-hmm.
This is move and scale, move in, and then this is again this is cube and turn.
Yeah.
And another one that I briefly want to show is a fantastic, amazing, powerful tool. It's called Magic Move. So let's hear, for example, this is I simpled it down, but this was a keynote file for a reorganization of a school. So basically, I had all kind of names in here, and then I made this as a slide, and then these are 3D objects. You can edit those. There's like you can edit those values, but the point is that so if I want to go from this slide, and then I want to show the reorganization, and I want to go to this slide to show what happens with your organization. So there is only one transition that does this, and this play in window, and you dual click, the presenter is clicking, okay, here's what's going to change, and you click this, and this whole thing is automatically calculated. There's no individual animation, there's no individual
and that's because the objects are the same, right? You're copying that slide and then changing the position and animation of those objects, so it knows where those objects are. That's how it does the Magic Move.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So that's extremely powerful. To do that any other, even in motion, that would take you forever. But it's butterly smooth, and
go ahead, Jason, and then we're going to move on to questions.
I have a very, very similar, but completely different, just because design is different. Maybe I'll do it in the after show, but I mean, it would blow. Like, if you think you can't do it in Keynote, realize that I feel like they prototype some motion things in Keynote.
Yeah, well, and again, I think that if you're not if you're not an animator, I think that you can really get into a position where you can animate stuff that looks really cool and comes together. You can see how complex Lawrence was making those animations and putting those things together, and that's all just in Keynote. That would be a lot of keyframes, to get that done well, even in motion, and like a long time to do the other parts. So anyway, in After Effects. Next question. We're going to burn through these.
Yeah, I think the sense of this is there a way to feature these types of PowerPoint exhibitions over speaker in different locations, camera sources and homes in a single Zoom meeting?
Not really. The way that you would do that, and we're going to play with it a little bit, is that you grab onto the participant view if you could get a higher resolution. So the step-by-step here is get a room or a Facebook portal to join to make sure that the participants are still getting, well, if you're in a Zoom meeting, you now have a 720p source file to work with. Then you have to screen scrape it and then add those graphics on top of it. But there's not but then you do it over each person as a live stream. But right now, there's no way to put the different locations and everything else. Now, Zoom has already talked about the fact that they're going to add lower thirds. So you'll have some kind of basic lower third tool. But what we're showing you here is a lot more complex. If each person has their own switcher, they can all do it. A lot of us here do, so we could probably do a lot of these things. But that's how that would work. There's not any good way to do it for each angle. But if you did a single Zoom, that's the speaker view, and people are talking, and then you could roll it up, but you'd have to scrape it out of Zoom and put it into something. Next question.
Our friend Tucker DeGrew of Oklahoma City said, can you tie the name or title to a spreadsheet for populated content in Keynote?
I think you can, but we've never done it in Keynote. So the way we have done that in the past is it's been for stills, not animations. And now I believe that Keynote is still just an XML. I think Keynote still, the file itself is still just an XML. So I think that you could theoretically programmatically add slides and do those things. I think it's possible. But I've never done it that way. What we've done in the past when we've had still lower thirds is use the scripting inside of Photoshop. And in that case, we were basically changing all the names. You build the template of what you want, you import the XML, and it literally just pushes it all to the switcher. So it just pushes it to the we had it built for the Atem, so it would literally just populate the Atem with everything, and it would just do all of them. And then what was nice is if there was a typo, we just had them fix it in the Excel. We just make them all again. Go ahead, Lawrence.
You can do it in Motion. You can link a spreadsheet, and there's a program that's called CVS to Motion templates.
Mm-hmm.
And I created, like, for ceremony ones, like 100 lower thirds with names, and it creates 100 motion templates in like seconds.
Yeah.
And then you drag those motion templates into compressor to render them out in 444, and you got them.
Yep. But yeah, if you want to do it in Keynote, I think it's possible, but I haven't seen it done. Next question.
Sky from the panel in Seattle. How could Brian Anderson explain how he uses AppleScript with Keynote?
Go ahead, Brian.
I had about 2 hours worth of training videos to cut last fall that were a whole lot of bullet builds and a whole lot of charts and graphs and a lot of magic move kind of stuff. And exporting as 444 is possible and easy enough to do, but it's about 10 clicks to get one video out. So I wrote some Apple scripts where you could select maybe 5 slides that together made the video you wanted. One click, boom, out they go. And it also, if you put the name that you want the file to be in the presenter notes, it's in the clipboards. You can just copy paste, or you can just paste, and the file name is automatic. And I'm happy to share that with everyone in Discord. The other thing I did is a script that exports markers from Premiere, and a script that would then just create a Keynote file with a blank slide ready to go for all of the animations, one for each marker. So.
And it might be able to populate stuff with that.
You might be able to, you might be able to populate with AppleScript. I don't want to comment because I'm not sure.
Right. Yeah, so we'll keep on looking at that. Next question.
Ernest Floyd of Bastrop, Louisiana. Can Alex make that sample Keynote file available?
I can. In fact, I'm doing it while we're answering questions. So I already moved it over to my computer, and I'll try to get it in the next within the next couple minutes. Next question.
Next question from John Pewitt of the panel in Huntersville. If I edit on my Mac, will the slides update during the presentation on my iPad?
No.
Yeah, it locks it. It locks it. It won't look at what the saved changes are until you jump out of the presentation mode, specifically to keep that from happening. Next question.
Mike Henderson of Colorado says, how would you deal with live switching between multiple lower thirds, or would it be easier to bring them into the Atem media pool after exporting from Keynote?
Well, usually what happens is you can put them in succession, so they can just hit one and then just keep on going if you know what the order of how you're cutting. The hard part has always been that you have to randomly grab the one that you need. And so, again, that's where 2 of them come in handy, of being able to grab them, but also just knowing what slide number different people are at. You can type that number in and get to it, but there's not a real easy way. And again, you turn the key off, you find it, you tell the person it's ready to go, and then you do it. But again, when you start randomly accessing these, they do get more heavy. Lawrence?
There's one huge advantage if you export stills or in PNGs and import them in the media pool. The media pool does support full transparency without keying.
Yeah. So you can do all the transparency in stills. This is if you want to animate it, if you want to keep it live so that you can keep on changing things. Those are the advantages of Keynote. And again, the animations are there. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Wasn't somebody earlier in this show actually talking about a full screen playout from an iPad? I mean, you could export the stills, put it in something like that, and then you could randomly click on what you need, kind of like a Stream Deck for stills.
You definitely could. I mean, if you're doing stills, there's a lot of things to do. I think the Keynote real advantage is being able to do little animations to make that work. Next question.
Jeff Francis in the panel and from Columbia, South Carolina. Do all Atem switchers use the same Luma key engine? If I develop and test on an Atem Mini Pro, will that transfer successfully to an Atem TVS Pro 4K or Production Studio 4K?
Go ahead, Jason.
The key phrase here is all. The answer is no. Straight up no. But
I don't know.
I don't think it's going to matter for the Luma keyer.
The Luma keyer, I don't think has changed significantly since the very first version, because it's Luma key is a pretty old way to do things. And so I don't think the Luma key has literally changed since the production switchers and the 2ME and 4MEs with the fins. I think that the Luma key has operated exactly the same. Next question.
Gabriel Ung of Malaysia says there are some instances on Keynote when one slide would not load during the presentation. Other slides were okay. The slide had a simple dissolve for text. Even when we recreated the slide, the problem still occurred. Has anybody else experienced this?
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I've occasionally had a piece of toxic media that got put on a slide, or actually that I use on my Mac in general, that would get some infinite loop piece of code stuck in the slide somewhere. And every time we use that, I had to go back to the original thing and rebuild it and bring it in fresh to get rid of it. So that is possible.
That might be the issue. Next question.
Lawrence Stroby of Hermosa Beach here.
Lauren's already shared that chart. Let's go to the next question.
Yeah. Tony Adamopoulos, Missouri. Regarding the converting from PowerPoint, is there a way to bulk remove all animations from PowerPoint slides before importing them into Keynote, bulk remove being essential?
Not that I know of. I don't know how to, other than, I don't know what happens with PowerPoint if you export them all as slides. It may give you the fully built slide as JPEGs on the way out. That might be the only way that I could think of that you could freeze them. Next question.
This comes from Eddie Martinez, Sacramento. Did I hear that iPad is used for the image out? Is this through a USB-C to HDMI adapter, or how do you get the image into the switcher? And I use Lightning to HDMI, but yeah.
Yeah, for the mini, for this presentation here, I could absolutely, literally, I have a cable that is HDMI to USB-C. And that's what I'm using to my Mac right now. I'm using an iMac to do this, but I could have plugged that into my Keynote and plugged it into my my iPad, and it would totally work. And then Jeff's showing you can use a Lightning to HDMI adapter. So all of that stuff will absolutely work. Next question.
Stuart Fairweather of Melbourne and the panel. Keynote pages on Apple's site says real-time collaboration, whether on Mac, iPad, iPhone, or PC. Download page says Mac OS 10.15 or later. Where do we find the iPhone, iPad, or PC versions?
In the App Store. I don't know about the PC version. The PC version is...
It's just a web browser.
Yeah, it's a web browser that you can do it. And I got to tell you, the collaboration on the Apple Office things is horrible. It's just like I would not use it. I don't, I'm a big Mac fan. That is not something they figured out how to do well yet. So they're still working. It's still very much a work in progress. I've given up trying to share documents with people to interface with. It's painful. So I don't do that. Anyway, next question.
Oliver Breidenbeck from Europe and here today. Has anyone used the Keynote remote presentation little applet for live events?
We have for this show. So when we had a couple of them, we've had people present from somewhere else in the world, and I just have my computer opened, have a video out. Chris Summers, I think his First They Killed My Father presentation was all done from where he was in Budapest, I think. And so he's there just going forward on it, and it was changing all the slides on our end, and it felt seamless, and it loads the whole deck onto my side so that it plays out. It's not loading stuff up. And he had movies and he had stills and everything else. It works better than anything we've seen when it comes to like shared presentations. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I think I was playing it out through the machine that usually plays out WLM.
Oh, that's
and,
right. Yep.
Yeah, there were some inconsistencies with the latency of it. Sometimes it would be instant, sometimes it would be like half a second late. But all in all, like if you're not doing anything like that really needs to be specific, like hit the mark time wise, then it works pretty well.
Yeah, it's very, very effective. So you could theoretically run your lower thirds from somewhere else. If that's where you're going, where you can just have the lower thirds tied in. That should work. We've actually done that with the Atems, where when they're on a VPN, we have other people log into the Atems and just run the Atem lower thirds, and all the graphics and even the whole switcher from somewhere else. Go ahead, Courtney.
Is it possible to build a macro on the ATM that would trigger the next slide in the keynote to transition lower thirds?
Absolutely.
Switching between different inputs?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wait, an Atem macro?
Yeah,
Yes,
you could definitely, you could have a macro, just do a call out and it would tell it. And I'm sure that Memo Live would do the same thing. Like where any of these that have any kind of external protocol should be able to push that out into a protocol that it just needs to publish it and something else has to see it and then go do it. So most of these switchers, even OBS and other ones should be able to activate that. Brian?
I was just going to ask, where are you going to put your keynote sample, and I'll put the script in the same place. I didn't see a good spot.
Where should I put it is I guess the question. That's why it's not up there right now, is I was like, what do I do with it?
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. I guess I'll put it in office hour chat, I think. I'll just throw it in there.
If you put it in chat, doesn't Sky scrape those into the chat links in Discord?
Well, that is a function I do. Is that?
Well, I'm going to put it in there and people can figure out what they want to do with it. I mean, I don't. That's a pretty simple document there. I'm not that attached to it, other than it didn't show up where I wanted it to. Anyway, so yeah, I'll put it. I'm going to put it into the chat there, and then we can figure out where it goes after that. I don't really have a good repository for it at the moment. I'm lost in Windows. I'm not Windows, but I'm lost in. I have many windows open, and I've clicked on the wrong one, and now I can't find you guys again. All right, there we go. Hi. You're still here. All right. So anyway, so we're going to go ahead. Thank you again. I hope that was useful. I have to admit, before we started this, I was like not certain that I would have enough to say, or we wouldn't have enough to talk about. Like I was like, should I have done this? So, but it definitely turned out great. And I'm really thanks to Lawrence for showing a great, even a better example than what I had for animations. And hopefully this gets you excited about the idea that, you don't have something to build it. You don't have a lot of money, but you do have maybe a little bit of time to work on it. And it's just so much easier to get started with graphics. And I've literally built whole demos of what the animations would be in motion, and then the client just took the Keynote file and said, yeah, that's great, like the output of the Keynote file, like that's what I want. And I was like, okay, we could have made it better, but they were fine with it. So I think that you can do a lot of really, really good, probably, it's a very robust system, so hopefully that gets you excited about it, and we'll talk about it more in the future. And now we're going to go ahead and jump into the post show. Thanks again for all the panelists who showed up and all the participants who asked all the great questions and were great part of the conversation. And now I'm going to go ahead and start the post show. So I'll see some of you in just a couple minutes. Thanks, guys.